The debate had barely started when Jeanine Pirro launched into her signature-style sharp voice, pointed finger, and a tone halfway between outrage and certainty. Her words cut through the noise, accusing Jasmine Crockett of hypocrisy, double standards, and playing politics rather than caring about truth. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing something more heated than the usual back and forth. For a few seconds, it seemed Pirro might control the narrative completely. But Jasmine didn't rush to answer. Instead, she paused a pause that felt deliberate, almost heavy with calculation. Then she leaned forward, voice calm but eyes locked, directly on Pirro, and delivered a response that caught everyone off guard. She didn't match volume with volume. She matched fury with focus. Effect was immediate. Pirro, usually unshakable, visibly hesitated as the words landed harder than any raised voice could. Jasmine's clapback wasn't wild or messy. She started by calmly repeating Pirro's accusation, then dissected it piece by piece, exposing what she called selective outrage. Her voice stayed steady, even casual, but each point cut deeper than the last, where Pirro had tried to frame Jasmine as a politician hiding behind slogans. Jasmine reframed the attack as proof Pirro couldn't handle the substance of the argument itself. What stunned the audience wasn't only what Jasmine said, but how she said it, without shouting. She flipped the conversation entirely, from defending herself to questioning why. Pirro avoided the facts she'd brought to the table. It wasn't just a defense, it was an inversion. By the time she finished, Pirro had lost her rhythm, blinking and searching for words that didn't come. The silence that followed felt longer than it really was. Clips of the exchange spread, almost instantly online. Viewers shared the moment not because it was the loudest, but because it was the most precise. Jasmine didn't trade insults. She used the very accusation Pirro had hurled to highlight contradictions in Pirro's own record. Watching Pirro, so known for sharp comebacks, left momentarily speechless was something few expected, and that surprise made the clip viral. Critics tried to spin the silence as restraint on Pirro's part, but the footage told a different story. Hesitation, a caught breath, and then a pivot to a new topic that barely related to Jasmine's points. It was subtle but clear to anyone who watched closely. Pirro had come prepared to debate slogans, but Jasmine had brought facts and patience. And in that contrast, the moment belonged to Jasmine. What made the clapback so effective was its tone. Jasmine didn't sneer or mock. She spoke as though she was genuinely puzzled that Pirro refused to engage with the actual issue. That calm, disappointment resonated more than anger could. It framed Pirro not as an opponent to defeat, but as someone unwilling or unable to keep up with the argument. That shift left Pirro defensive and the audience leaning toward Jasmine. In interviews afterward, Jasmine brushed off praise for the moment, saying only that if someone shows up with noise, you don't beat them by being louder, you beat them by being clearer. That line itself became a quote passed around online, a quiet rebuke to the idea that debate has to mean volume. Her strategy reminded viewers that precision often hits harder than outrage, and that real strength can sound soft. Pirro, for her part, tried to regain footing later, calling Jasmine's words slick deflection. But the viral moment had already set the narrative. Viewers remembered the pause, the controlled tone, and the few seconds where the famously fierce Pirro found nothing to say. The story wasn't just that Jasmine clapped back, it was that she did so without ever raising her voice, leaving Pirro's own style looking noisy rather than strong. By the next day, analysts praised the exchange as a lesson in debate, that real power often lies not in shouting, but in staying grounded when attacked. And while Pirro's fans defended her fiercely, even some admitted surprise that her words had met silence not from fear, but from a response so precise it needed nothing louder to echo. As the story spread, what stuck wasn't just the clash itself, but the shape it took. Pirro's volume met by Jasmine's restraint, accusation met by dissection. In countless replays, viewers saw Jasmine tilt her head, pause, and choose each word with care. That choice made it impossible to paint her as rattled or emotional. Instead, it highlighted her calm as a deliberate strategy. The applause afterward wasn't just for what she said, but for the way she refused to let rage drag her off message. Online, people compared the moment to a courtroom exchange. One side bluster, the other side cross-examination. Memes captured Jasmine's slight smile, the one that appeared just as Pirro faltered. That expression became a shorthand for quiet confidence, shared with captions about winning arguments, not by shouting, but by knowing exactly what to say and when to stop. The internet turned the silence itself into a punchline, framing it as louder than any insult. Pirro's supporters called the clapback unfair, saying it twisted her words. But what many viewers saw was someone finally refusing to take the bait. Jasmine didn't try to out-insult. She turned the energy back on. Pirro calmly laying bare the gap between slogan and substance. That strategy didn't just silence Pirro. It revealed how empty some attacks sound when someone simply asks for proof. In that space, Pirro had nothing prepared. In follow-up appearances, Jasmine refused to boast. When asked how it felt to leave, Pirro speechless. She shrugged it off, saying debates weren't about winning a clip but about clarity. Yet even in that modest response, she reinforced why the moment worked. She'd shown that force doesn't always look like fury. Sometimes. The most devastating response is the one that sounds almost gentle. The clash also sparked a bigger conversation about political debate itself. Commentators asked whether shouting had become so normal that viewers found calm shocking. Jasmine's measured tone felt like a rebuke to a culture of volume over value. The viral success wasn't just because people enjoy a takedown, but because it reminded them what real argument can sound like: precise, direct, and built on facts rather than force. In quiet corners of political circles, strategists took note. They saw how Jasmine's approach, fusing to match outrage with outrage, had outmaneuvered a seasoned TV personality.
Ow.
It wasn't about avoiding confrontation, but about controlling it. And while not everyone could replicate her delivery, the moment stood as proof that keeping your cool can be the sharpest weapon of all. Pirro herself tried to reset the narrative, calling Jasmine's words polished spin, but the image had already stuck. The famous firebrand confronted by a calm voice and left for a few seconds without a comeback. It wasn't the end of Pirro's presence, but it added a chapter she couldn't fully erase. A clip viewers would return to whenever they talked about debates won by patience rather than volume. By the week's end, the moment had become part of Jasmine's public image. Supporters highlighted it as proof she could withstand the fiercest attacks without losing composure. Critics still disagreed with her politics, but many admitted respect for how she handled pressure. The clapback became not just something funny to watch, but a small lesson about how power can look and sound different than expected. In the end, what people remembered wasn't just the insult, or even the silence afterward. It was the choice. To stay calm when provoked, Jasmine Crockett's clapback didn't roar. It landed quietly, precisely, and left even the loudest voice at a loss. And in that quiet, the message carried further than any shout could.